You can have chanting, drums. You have dance and drama and pantomime. The whole field of orality, I think, fits with many, many cultures, and particularly in the majority world, where probably 70% of our world are, I'd say, preferred oral learners. I've seen really positive results over the last, say, 20 years in putting on numerous workshops and seeing kind of the lights go on in people's minds because they finally connected with something that fits their learning style. What you want to do is you've got a teaching style and a learning style, and you'd like to mesh those together. And I think in the past I was missing that connection, and the orality was kind of at least one key to really connect that. Well, orality is communication which is more face-to-face, mouth-to-mouth, working with people who I call preferred oral learners. So you have what's called primary learners in the area of orality, which would be people that were totally non-literate. But on the whole, we're working with either functionally non-literate or semi-non-literate type people, meaning they may have gone to school, but they either can't, won't, or they don't prefer to read. So they're taking in information in a more concrete relational type fashion. God's transfer of his revelation to us took many thousands of years, and that's debatable how long, but from Adam until Moses, it was an oral transmission. It was such a sacred story that it was kept pure, and God superintended it to make sure that when those stories got to the point to be written down, like in the Torah, that they were obviously inspired and that they were very good. The other aspect is when you get to the time of Jesus, probably 3 to 10% were literate. So you've got probably 90% that were less than literate. Jewish people were highly literate, but the overall population of that time period was oral. So, and years, obviously, of communicating the gospel before it was written down. There's a whole field of and a discipline of studying just how oral transmission was passed down. So there's called multiple intelligences. You know, I've often thought if I went to Botswana and was out in that very kind of a desert, jungle, wilderness place, I would last maybe a couple of days. But the intelligence of those people, they've been able to live there for centuries. It's not that they're less than, they haven't had a chance to do literate type. And I apply that the same way, that people who are oral sometimes have prodigious memories, and they're able to process in a very, very different way maybe than a highly literate type person, but it doesn't mean that their intelligence is lower. I want people to be as literate as possible. I have had a huge advantage going to a PhD level because of my literacy, but the fact is I don't see huge changes in this world. We're going to keep being in a situation with highly oral people, and our focus has usually been on literate type people, and we've done a good job. If we want to finish, we need to focus on the majority world and make sure that we're teaching them that the way they learn. So I have about 105 stories that I work on all the time, trying to keep fresh, and that's the fuel for my ministry at this present time. So when I'm evangelizing, I'm thinking back to that database. When I'm doing a small group, when I'm preaching, that's the change from a very highly literate person who is educated past his intelligence to someone who is not in the pulpit and I'm asking questions of the congregation. It's been pretty much a 180-degree kind of paradigm shift as far as some of the communication I'm doing. You need one point person. Your organization needs to designate a person that could really investigate orality, that could study it, to go to workshops. I have probably been to 10 different workshops trying to get my head around this. And that person would know the culture of the organization, but also he'd be an expert in orality. And then he could speak into the organization at the level they need to use orality. I've often thought that we've done a really good job with the more highly literate people. And I'm from the buckle of the Bible Belt, 90 churches in a town of 25,000. How many times did I hear the gospel? And how many places are there in the world that have more literacy that at least have a chance or have been exposed? But to finish the Great Commission, we have to concentrate on the unengaged, the unreached people groups. 1040 window, you can just look at the stats on the oral needs within that window. So if we're going to finish the Great Commission, I think we obviously need a strategy that really addresses the whole issue of orality. I think the bottom line is all of us want a number of tools in our tool belt. Orality is not a silver bullet. It shouldn't be hyped too much. But I think anybody that's a missionary, a cross-cultural worker, he needs the ability to take God's word, particularly the narrative sections of it, to understand the felt needs of his people group, and then work on stories to have them in their heart pocket and able to connect with those felt needs. You always have to get back to the biblical basis for it, the Old Testament and the oral transmission, but particularly looking at Jesus as an example. He asked questions. He was a Socratic type teacher, and he was someone who used stories and parables in an extensive way. And we want to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. Just one day, this would be one day experience with storytelling, is I went into a kitchen with a Thai Buddhist lady. I told her the Mary and Martha story because she reminded me of Martha. And we had a wonderful discussion that really showed her the positive aspects of God's word relating to where she was. Then I went outside of the guest house, and there was a man making roti. He was a Muslim. And I told him the story of Abraham and Isaac, and he thought that was very interesting because he felt it was Ishmael that was actually offered. And then that just built a bridge for more conversation and a chance to share the gospel. I finished the day going to the airport in a taxi, and I looked down at a book that the taxi driver, Buddhist taxi driver, was reading, and it was a monk. And I said, "Why do you like this monk?" And he said, "Oh, my monk, he can change salt water into fresh water." What story do you think I told him? So I went to the book of John, and I told him the story of Jesus turning water to wine. And once again, it built a bridge. It was an opportunity to actually continue a conversation. And then obviously the goal is to bring in more of the gospel